Hi, my loves. Welcome to another episode Inside Kinship, my podcast where we get deep about the relational dynamics between dog moms and their dogs. Today, I actually want to talk about a pattern that I kind of often notice come up in dog moms, especially those who have really complex dogs. And I kind of call it like the hop on and hop off with training approaches. And I want to talk a little bit about my sense of why this happens and what it kind of really points towards right beneath the surface. So the pattern that kind of shows up again and again, right, with dog moms, especially those who live with really complex dogs. And by complex dogs, I'm talking about dogs who are sensitive or reactive or anxious or shut down or intense or just all of this, right? The pattern kind of looks like they try one training approach, they feel really hopeful, they see a little progress, or sometimes they don't see any progress at all, right? Something about that particular approach doesn't quite land. And then they abandon that approach and move on to the next method or trainer or philosophy or framework, right? So if I think about, the time when I used to extensively do behavior consultations and, a big portion of the work that I did during that time was primarily with dogs who were reactive slash complex slash, kind of demonstrated a lot of defensive behaviors. None of the dog moms who came to me, were trying a behavior approach for the first time. They had been through a roster of professionals and they had tried, different kinds of schools of thought, right? So from, compliance and obedience work to R plus training to, even the use of aversives, whether that was in the form of a choke collar, whether that was in the form of, withdrawal of love, affection, of, um, or even like things like, reducing meals and all of that kind of stuff, right? So they had actually tried multiple different approaches before they kind of came to me. And my approach became pretty much, and I quote so many women who kind of said this to me: we've tried everything, and some have worked, some have not worked, so there is no harm in trying another way to address this. And from the outside, that kind of pattern can look really inconsistent, it can look very scattered, and it can also, and I'm going to be really honest, like land like it's a lack of commitment, right? But what I noticed about that pattern is that from the inside, it usually felt like just desperation mixed with such deep care, right? Um, and there's almost like this plea of, I just want to help my dog, I just want to help myself, I just want this situation to get better. And I don't understand why this method or any of the other methods that I've tried are just not working, right? And I think what's really important to say clearly is that most dog moms who hop on and hop off approaches are not flaky, they're not lazy. I have actually found that they are deeply attuned, extremely invested, and just really, really overwhelmed and exhausted. And that's actually why this pattern emerges, right? Now, this is true for all dogs, but I think complex dogs very specifically, and, again, speaking from my lived experience of being with a complex dog, they don't, like surface solutions don't work for them, right? And they definitely don't work for them for very long. They don't respond consistently to scripts or protocols or techniques, right? They don't stay within the neat boundaries of all of these kind of, approaches. They are dynamic beings, right? All dogs are dynamic beings, very much like human beings, right? They react differently depending on the environment, on time, on energy, on pressure, on relationship. They reflect back stress, urgency, expectation, and emotional states with just incredible depth and accuracy, right? And that's really where so many of these different training approaches begin to crack, because mainstream dog training systems, even the well-meaning ones, are built around external behavior modification. So the advice and the recommendation that is often given to dog guardians is, do this when the dog does X, apply this technique to get X outcome, follow this protocol for X number of weeks, right? Now, the thing is that these systems can be helpful. They can create structure for sure. They can absolutely support learning, and they can definitely give a sense to, dog moms that they're doing something towards these outcomes that they so desperately are seeking. But with dogs, and especially with complex dogs, they often fail to address the actual engine, for the lack of a better word, driving that particular behavior. And when that engine is not addressed, dog moms feel it. They sense that something is missing, even if they can't name it just yet. Right? And I think the key reframe that I want to kind of offer in this space is that when you keep switching approaches, it's often not because you don't know what you're doing. It's because your intuition is quietly saying this isn't the whole truth. Something inside you is noticing that your dog is complying but not settling. Your dog is performing but not really softening and relaxing. Your dog is behaving but not actually feeling safer. And so you keep moving on again and again and again, not because you're chasing novelty, but because you are chasing congruence. And so what's often absent from these approaches is an explicit invitation to step into what I call the relational field between, the dog and the human, right? And this relational field is an invisible space where nervous systems interact, where emotional states transmit, where regulation or dysregulation spreads, where safety is either built or eroded. And the thing is that most training approaches focus on what the dog is doing. There is very little space to ask, what is happening between the human and the dog? What is the state that the human is bringing into this moment? What is the dog experiencing the human as? Is the human feeling predictable? Is the human feeling calm? Is the human feeling pressured or anxious or unclear? And I have found that complex dogs, particularly, but I mean, again, this applies to all dogs, but complex dogs are exquisitely sensitive to this relational field. They don't respond just to cues and directions. They are responding to presence, to the presence that you are bringing into this relational field. This is where nervous system understanding becomes so freaking essential and not just something that is actually optional. A dog who is over-aroused or fearful or chronically stressed cannot integrate learning the same way that a regulated, calm dog can. And a dog mom who is tense, hyper-focused on outcomes or quietly worried is not neutral in that interaction, no matter how much she fakes it or performs. When dog moms solely rely on external solutions, what they are trying to do is unknowingly they are trying to override nervous system communication with strategy. Strategy and nervous system communication are not interchangeable. Your plan, your plan of action, what you decide to do or how you decide to approach a situation becomes effective only when your nervous system is primed to hold that. If your nervous system is sending different signals as compared to what you are being asked to do, that is incongruence. And that is exhausting for both your dog as well as you. So when we start thinking about shifts in behavior, especially, long-term shifts, that doesn't just shift because of clearer markers or better timing or, higher value rewards. What allows or facilitates that long-term shift is a change in the baseline relational safety between a dog and their human. Doesn't come from hopping onto another method. It actually comes from slowing down enough to feel what's happening in the body, yours and your dog's. I can tell you now, based on especially the number of women that I worked with in my behavior consultations, that this feels very hard to access. And it can feel hard to access for so many different reasons, right? One is, I think, when you are, and this is true for at least the pool of women that I worked with, who are chronically dysregulated, who are chronically stressed, and who are stuck in these, fight or flight cycles, slowing down and actually tuning into your body is very, very difficult. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. And there is so much resistance, very natural resistance that comes up to it. And so we would rather not attune to our own nervous system, to the messages that our body is giving us. And we would rather stay in our head and do things and operate from a really cognitive level as opposed to from a place of embodied presence. Right? The other thing that I've observed is that so many women feel really underconfident and don't feel empowered enough to trust their instincts, their intuition in the first place. They have been conditioned to believe over and over again that experts know better than their lived experience. That if something isn't working, then they are the ones who are doing it wrong. That more information, more knowledge equals better outcomes. So when their intuition whispers, this approach doesn't feel right for my dog, when that gut feeling kicks in, that gets overridden by credentials, by popularity, by certainty, by confidence from outside voices. And so many women have been taught to value that external voice over the internal voice, over our own reading of the situation. And that creates an internal split. So then they keep trying to follow these instructions and follow these protocols and techniques, while their nervous system quietly resists all of it because it doesn't feel congruent. And that inner conflict, that dissonance, is what often leads to that hopping. Because ultimately, all of us have a very fundamental, basic need to live in balance, to live in homeostasis. And that dissonance, that split, does not create that safety for that balance. And so we're constantly trying to find a way to reduce that split as much as possible and not exist in that state of dissonance. And I think what's so interesting, and I think this has to do so much with, again, toxic capitalist systems where instinct and intuition are often dismissed as soft or unscientific. Right? Lived experiences are dismissed for quote unquote scientific data, for methodologies, and for outcomes that are evidence-based. And I'm not dissing those, right? Because again, I lean into that science 100%, but I also honor lived experiences. I also honor how we see the world and how we perceive the world and how that shapes the information that we consume and shapes how we make decisions and shapes how we lean into different ways of existing with our dogs. And what I think is so important, which is again the work that I end up doing quite often now in my one-on-ones with dog moms, is that I kind of bring to attention that instinct and intuition, these are pattern recognition systems that are informed by micro observations, by relational memory, by nervous system feedback, by lived experience. And so when a dog mom senses that a technique actually escalates her dog, instead of helping them soften or calm down or feel more relaxed or safe, that is not imagination. When she notices that her dog is shutting down rather than learning, rather than feeling safe, that is not weakness. When she finds herself bracing or scanning the environment before doing something with a dog, that is information. And our dogs demand that we listen to this level of data, not as a replacement for skill or knowledge, but alongside it. Right? And, I want to give you an example of a client that I've been working with in my one-on-one capacity. And she kind of came into this conversation with me, with aspiration to be able to walk her dog confidently and, in a very regulated, attuned way. And that was one of our coaching agendas. And over the course of our conversations, what I very clearly realized was that she understands what needs to happen cognitively, but her nervous system is not ready for this experience. And that is exactly the pattern that, again, I see happen with so many women, that they consume information and knowledge as a way to fill a gap, to fill that dissonance. But what they're actually seeking is not cognitive input. What they're actually seeking is nervous system input. And so in the case of this particular client, after several conversations together and after having spent time together, we ended up concluding that she was not ready to show up in these walks in the way that she desired. And that when she did feel ready for that step, we would integrate the knowledge that she has accumulated into her actual lived experience. But right now, her body, her nervous system feels like these walks are a danger. And so no matter how much information she shows up with on those walks, they're not going to give her the experience that she so desperately desires, because her nervous system is already checking out from that experience. And so the deeper transition that so many dog moms are unconsciously circling around is the transition from how do I get my dog to stop doing this to what does my dog need from me in this moment to feel safer. So we move from how do I get my dog to stop doing this to what does my dog need from me in this moment to feel safer. That's a really powerful question because it changes everything. It pulls the focus out of performance and into presence. How are you showing up in that moment? Not for your dog, but how are you showing up in the moment with your dog in that situation? It pulls you out of control and into connection. Are you feeling connected to yourself in that moment? Are you feeling connected with your dog? Or are you just trying to control and manage the situation? It pulls you out of external authority and into relational responsibility. So instead of saying, hey, you're gonna have to do what I'm asking you to do, but instead of that, we move towards, is this experience, is how I'm showing up right now in this manner fair to you and me? Is this allowing for us to experience trust and attunement and responsiveness? And yes, of course, this requires the human to do all of this internal work, which is why it is so often avoided. And so it's not accidental that so many dog moms with specifically complex dogs are emotionally perceptive, they're intuitive and relationally oriented. I mean, even if they weren't in so many degrees, when you end up sharing space with a dog, especially a complex dog, like all of those aspects of yourself pretty much come to the fore. Right? Because these dogs need humans who can actually feel, who can feel the discomfort, who can sit with the discomfort. But the problem is that the same women, the same humans often doubt their own knowingness, because they've been taught to prioritize external validation over internal coherence. And so they keep searching, they keep hopping, they keep trying one thing from the other until something finally names the truth that they have been living, that the work isn't about training the dog. It's about learning how to be with the dog. And so if you are someone who has been hopping from approach to approach, I want to paint you a picture of what stops the hopping. And it's not when the quote unquote perfect method is found. The hopping stops when you understand how nervous systems interact. When you learn to notice your own internal state without judgment. When you begin trusting your own relational instincts. When you start seeing behavior, both yours and your dog's, as communication. When you feel empowered rather than corrected. And at that point, whatever you use, whatever techniques or protocols or tools that you end up using become just tools. They don't become lifelines. They don't become identities. They don't become rigid belief systems. And when that happens, your relationship starts to feel stable. Your relationship starts to feel safe. And that provides the foundation, the fertile soil for secure attachment to start blossoming. And so I have found that dog moms don't hop because they're lost. They're hopping because they're searching for something real. And what they're actually looking for isn't another approach. It is permission to fully step into their relationship, to trust their gut, to recognize that the most powerful intervention available to their dog is who they are in the moment they meet them. Once that clicks, the ground stops shifting beneath their feet. Not because the dog becomes quote unquote easy, but because the relationship starts to become honest. And so if this entire episode lands for you, I want to invite you into my 6-week container called Resonance, where I help you move out of constant vigilance and survival into a more regulated, responsive, attuned version of yourself with your dog. And we don't do this through techniques and approaches and methodologies. We do this by just really reconnecting with our nervous system, with really looking at our relationship with our own nervous system, with understanding our survival patterns, with understanding our fight or flight responses in situations, and learning to notice them, learning to recognize them, and bringing alive the possibility of what it means to just show up in those moments. And so over the 6 weeks, you get access to weekly audio teachings that are going to spark all of these reflections. You get access to reflective prompts to initiate threads of conversation and start, opening up to noticing some of the patterns and to, creating space to just acknowledge and recognize what's coming up for you in especially challenging moments with your dog. You get access to community support because Resonance is a group container. So it's not something that you do in isolation, but you get to be witnessed and supported and celebrated by other women who are on the similar journey of finding more attunement in their relationship with their dogs. And what is super cool about Resonance is that you actually have access to 2 investment options. And again, the reason why I have designed it that way is because everybody is on a different journey. And so it's possible that some of you need, more low touch support, for which the Resonance container, which takes shape in the form of a Telegram space, works beautifully. That's where I'm actually going to be, sharing those audio teachings. But for those of you who feel like you want to do a little bit more depth work, a little bit more personalized work, you also have an investment option that allows you to sign up for one-on-one coaching with me over 2 sessions across the 6 weeks, and plus a few other personalized tools to help you just really deepen the work that you're doing. So you have access to both kinds of investment options based on where you are at this point in your journey and what you feel that your nervous system can really handle. And so the program is officially open. There is an early bird pricing to it that lasts till the 7th of January. And so if you were to step in an early bird pricing for whichever investment, you get immediate access to the Telegram space, to the Resonance container. Plus, there is a bonus audio teaching that's going to be available for you in the Telegram space as a active, as just an expression of gratitude for stepping in early into the space. And so resonance is now open. If you feel like you're at a point in your relationship with your dog where you are ready to step into just wanting more trust and spaciousness and connection with them instead of constantly operating from this fight or flight space, then resonance is a great start to that chapter in your life. The details are going to be available in the show notes. If you have any questions about it, feel free to drop me an email. If not, I would love for you to sign up, and I would love to be able to see you inside the container. Till my next episode, sending you lots of love, and continue to notice patterns and the relational field that your dog and you share.